wish everyone was as attentive on a Sunday morning. Right. So a very warm welcome to Christchurch this evening on this rather muggy night, but we're here right in the middle of the constituency. It's good to see lots of people coming out tonight to engage in democracy. Democracy is clearly alive and well here in North Stoke. As well, of course, welcoming you in person. Also like to welcome those who are watching via the live stream or will be watching on catch-up, and also those who will be tuning in to the Cross Ribbons radio broadcast a bit later or next week. It's very good this evening to be able to welcome 4 of the 6 candidates who are standing for election in this constituency. So we've got Carl Beresford, the Reform candidate, to my right, Jag Boyapati, who's the Independent, to my left. On the far left is Jonathan Gullis, representing the Conservative Party. Probably the first time you've been referred to as being far left, Jonathan. And then on the far right, we have David Williams from the Labour Party. All the candidates were invited. Josh Harris is also standing from the Green Party, who's not here this evening. And I contacted the agent for the Lib Dems, and they confirmed that Lucy Hurds is a paper candidate, so as a result, she obviously isn't here this evening. Now, there have been a number of polls over the last few weeks suggesting that Labour will more than likely form the next government. But of course, as everyone knows, the only poll that really matters is polling day in a week's time from today. Now, on the 4th of July, when you go to your local polling station, you won't find Sir Keir Starmer's name on the paper, Nigel Farage, Rishi Sunak, Ed Davey, or any of the others. No, it will be those who are sitting in front of you today. And despite being a general election, it's about choosing the candidate who you feel knows the area best and what needs to be done and all that goes with it, who can represent us here in Stoke North best in Westminster. And I know that some people are finding it quite hard, as in every election, who to vote for, and hopefully tonight's questions and answers will help steer you in the right direction to make your mind up. Now, this evening I'll be channeling my inner Fiona Bruce and Lindsay Hoyle, trying to keep order and ask the candidates to be courteous with one another, to answer the questions that they're asked and try not to diverge off topic too much. I'd also ask those who are asking the questions, please, to also show respect. Remember that we're in church, and also whatever you say will be live streamed to the world. Now, I'd like to begin by asking each of the candidates to make their opening remarks, and then afterwards there'll be questions sent to me by email and also some from the floor. Please make sure any questions you ask is not directed at one particular candidate alone, and it's general enough to be answered by all of the panel. So, first of all, if all the candidates would please introduce themselves alphabetically, and I'll do it by surname, why they're standing, and tell us a couple of interesting facts about themselves. Now, of course, if you feel the need to tell us what your father did for a living, feel free. That seems to be quite a popular moment, and also whether you had Sky TV as a child or not. These are clearly the important things that everyone wants to know. So initially, there'll be, say, 3 minutes each just to give your opening comments, and if I can start alphabetically with Carl, please, now.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Can you hear me at the back? Sorry, I didn't hear you. Can you hear me at the back? Good, good. You want to know a little bit about me? There's not a lot to say, really. I'm just an ordinary Joe. I left school at 16. I had an ordinary comprehensive education, bad one at that. I left with nothing. I had some unfortunate times in my teen years, and I was living rough on the streets of Birmingham for a while. That was an experience, I can tell you, in the boot night shelter, or the penny rope as we called it. We all gathered round it at night, and in the morning they literally undid the rope and you all fell off it and out you went. It was a tough start for a young 16-year-old kid. However, I kind of picked myself up, and I can say now, or at least my wife would say, that I'm a happily married man. I've got 8 children, 6 grandchildren, and a small business. And it is a small business. I work in the care sector as a water services and heating engineer, and I operate all over the country. it's one of the reasons why it's been very difficult with such short notice on the election to get around to see you all. It isn't because I didn't want to, it's literally because I haven't had the time. I have lived for 57 years, and I can remember strikes in the 70s, I can remember blackouts, I can remember no electricity, water strikes, no milk, the bread strike. I even remember the school dinner ladies going on strike. And the miners, of course. I left school, and I remember our school careers officer saying to me, "What do you want to be when you leave school?" And I remember saying to him, "What's the point? There are 3 million people unemployed. What chance do you think I've got of having a job?" I have to say that was rather foolish and naive. I'm a little bit older now, as you can imagine, and I've lived through red and blue governments. And I've seen...
30 seconds, please.
Thank you. I've seen everything around me fall into disrepair over that time. We don't seem to be getting better. We seem to be getting busier, fuller, and more derelict. And that's why I've come into politics as a Reform UK candidate, because I want to see positive change, not only for myself, but for all of you too. Thank you.
Hi. Hello, can you hear me? So welcome everyone. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. So my name is Dr. Jack Boyapati. I'm a GP working just across the road in Alexandra Park in Tunstall. I've been a GP now for 18 years and have worked in this area for at least 12 years. I come from India. I've been here for 24 years and I made this my home. I've got 2 children, a 17-year-old daughter and an 11-year-old boy. And I've also got a lovely pet dog, married happily. In my free time, I cycle, hike, walk. I've also done some volunteering. Of note, some of the things I really have cherished volunteering is raising about £1,000 for a charity. Then we hiked up Ben Nevis and raised about £1,500 for the ICU here during COVID. I've also volunteered in the London 2012, and I've also volunteered in Birmingham for Cricket World Cup. As a GP, I meet people from all sections of society. And fortunately, this has given me the opportunity to understand the social, economic, and financial challenges that we all face. Over the years, we have put our faith in all the major political parties. And what have we got? They promise a lot and deliver little. So the time has come for new leaders to see these challenges with fresh pair of eyes, to bring in new perspectives and come up with smart solutions. I am not a career politician. This is my first venture into politics. I have only one agenda. I care for the people in the communities where I work. I want to work hard, fight hard, and make sure that the people and communities where I work get the best deal. That's why I put myself forward as an independent. Thank you very much.
Well, hello everyone. It's an absolute pleasure to be here before you again. 4.5 years on from when you gave me the honour of a lifetime to serve as the Member of Parliament for Stoke-on-Trent North, Kidsgrove Talk, the first ever elected Conservative in this seat's history. Finally, bringing about change after 70 years of doom and gloom under Labour, who had no aspiration, no ambition, no understanding of what was needed for our area. In fact, no plan whatsoever. And in that time, I've been proud to have stood up in Parliament 761 times, contributing 4 times more than my Labour predecessor, in order to make sure this area is yet again on the map, that this area is not forgotten, and that this area gets the funding and gets the support that it so rightfully deserves. That starts with creating jobs, 500 brand new jobs in the Home Office at 2 Smithfield, up to 1,700 brand new jobs being created at Chatterley Valley West. That means making sure that we finally get the investment that we need to fix our roads and pavements. And I was delighted to work with the Prime Minister to secure over £200 million for Stoke-on-Trent and Staffordshire through the cancellation of the northern leg of HS2. It's now up to our local councils to finally get on with the job and fix those potholes, because I launched a pothole patrol where I reported 800 potholes in my period of time. My Labour opponent, in the 4 years that he was a councillor between 2019 and 2023, only bothered to report on average 2 per month. In fact, the Labour councillor in Brady and Shell Heath only bothered 19 in that same entire 4-year period. That means, yet again, you being taken for granted, promises made, promises not delivered. I've also made sure that we use the Kidsgrove Town deal to right the wrong of Labour's past by reopening Kidsgrove Sports Centre, which Labour allowed to close when they couldn't be bothered to spend £1 to save it. I've secured £6.5 million to regenerate Burslem and Tunstall's High Street through the Levelling Up Partnership Fund, £1.3 million to make sure that we can breathe new life into Burslem Indoor Market, funding as well for the Tunstall Library in Bath, and changing the law so that we have now increased fines on rogue and absent landlords, which sadly the Labour Council has refused to take action on, despite the numerous requests and the hundreds who have signed my Stop the Rot petition. We've recruited over 333 additional police officers. I've secured CCTV for Tunstall through the Safer Streets Fund, when I rightly called out the scrote savages and scumbags who plagued our town centre, and sadly no Labour councillor signed that petition at any stage in its process. I also made sure that I got funding for the Haywood Walk-in Centre to get a new outpatient centre, which is going to be fantastic for our local community, and a new community diagnostic centre, enabling 85,000 additional appointments each and every year to enable to have those life-saving scans and x-rays. Change is when you voted for it in 2019. I was proud to stand up and deliver for Stoke-on-Trent North Kidsgrove and Talk, and I ask you kindly to lend me your vote once again so I can continue in this endeavour.
Wow, I've only just stood up, but after that I feel like sitting back down again, to be honest. So hello, can you hear me okay at the back? I just wanted to say that being in church, because that's what my priest always says. So I'm David Williams, and I'm Labour's MP candidate for Stoke-on-Trent North and Kidsgrove. And I'll give you a bit of my background about why I got involved in politics. So a lot of people know my mum and my granddad, they worked in the pot banks around Tunstall and Burslem. I've always worked around the city, despite what some of my opponents may say about me not being local. I'm very local. And for the past 20 years, I've been at the YMCA in Hanley, that many of you know. And I'll tell you about my route into politics, because I'm not a career politician. I didn't go off and study at a top fee-paying school or go and study politics at university. I got involved because I saw the real impact of Conservative cuts on our city and the impact of austerity on our community. For me, it's personal. I'm fiercely proud of our community. I want the best for our community, and that's why I put myself forward to be Labour's candidate. And I'm so pleased that since I got selected in February last year, I've spoken to nearly 20,000 people on the doors. It's okay putting leaflets through with lots of numbers and figures on. You only get to understand what people really care about when you go knock on doors, speak to people, and find out what people really care about. So, as I say, my route into politics was my job at the YMCA. If people don't know, I'm Director of Business Development. And the reason I got political was because what I did in that role was bring in £25 million with my colleagues, and we did that to replace all the services taken away by 40 years of Conservative cuts. You'll hear about levelling up, you'll hear about money coming in. The reality is, levelling up doesn't come anywhere near close to replacing the money taken off us by this Conservative government over the last 14 years. So my job is to stand up for you. We've got the 6 key steps that we've talked about as a Labour Party. I'm assuming we'll hopefully touch on some of those as the debate goes on. But I just wanted to say thank you to the organisers for putting the event on, and let's hope we have a civilised debate. Thank you.
Right, so we'll now come on to the questions. So I've got some that have been sent in by email previously, then we'll do some of those, and we'll get some from the floor so we get a good mix. Now, a nice, easy, non-controversial one to start with is one that's been sent in by email. And this is Amy from Kidsgrove, writes, in April, the Royal Stoke unveiled a welcome banner with 21 flags celebrating the 21 different genders and sexualities that the NHS now recognises. This led to lots of press coverage on TV and in the papers. One of the nurses said, "This is absolute madness. I'm exhausted. No one's asked us. Me and the team are up to our knees because we're so tired and understaffed. But rather than put investment in frontline care, the Trust wants to spend money on ridiculous banners like this." So a nice easy one. Do you agree with the nurse that this is an example of woke nonsense, or do you agree with the hospital that there are indeed 21 genders and sexualities? So it's a nice easy one to get going, and I think perhaps Dr. Jagger's working in the NHS, that might be your forte first.
Thank you very much. Some of these discussions are complex. It is difficult to reduce it to agreeing or not agreeing. What I would like to say is we need to respect everyone for what they are, and it is a good gesture from the hospital to at least put that banner out saying that anyone and everyone, irrespective of whether they form a major group or minor group, are respected in the hospital. So I do respect that decision. In terms of whether it's value for money, again, sometimes we need to be, a mark of a good society is how nicely we, see each other, respect each other. So I would like to say, from the hospital side, they would have done that. They have done that to show that they respect everyone, irrespective of how they see themselves. So on that note, I would like to say, it was good that the hospital displayed that. I would like to think a banner in the grand scheme of things wouldn't have costed the hospital that much. So, the hospital was just telling that everyone is welcome. Thank you.
Well, Amy in Kidsgrove, as far as I know, there are only two genders, male and female. That's it. You can call yourself a man if you're a woman, and you can call yourself a woman if you're a man. I entirely respect that, but don't expect me to go along with that delusion. And I'm pretty sure that if you go to the doctors as a man pretending to be a woman and tell the doctor that you're pregnant, I'm pretty sure they're not going to be offering you a pregnancy test. I'm sorry, the money, and it won't be a small amount of money, along with all the rainbow crossings and flags everywhere, I would rather that money went into patient care, not into gesturing and virtue and other forms of woke nonsense. Thank you.
David?
I started by saying I'd spoken to about 20,000 people on the doors in the past year, and I could count up on one hand the number of people who've talked to me about this topic. What people are talking to me about is cost of living. I was on a street not too long ago where people were taking it in turns, going to one person's home so the other neighbours could turn off the heating, turn off the lights to save money. People had talked to me about NHS waiting times and how they're in pain because they're waiting so long. Well, we will tackle it because the question's been asked, and that's absolutely fine. But what I'll start by saying is I really dislike the way this has become such a divisive way of doing politics in our country. It's all about stoking culture wars. And the reason to stoke culture wars is when you've had 14 years of Conservative chaos, when you can't point to anything positive, that's why some of my opponents might want to have diversionary tactics to talk about it. Now, what I'll say is both gender reassignment and sex should remain protected characteristics. We need to respect and show dignity to people. I was actually at Stoke Pride recently, and I think I'll sum this up by one person who was going through transition, and they struggled with this for years. And they were telling me about how, for a number of times, they've nearly attempted to take their own lives. And they told me the reason they're doing this is because they're feeling so under pressure, they need guidance, they need support, but all they say is this kind of rhetoric being brought around by politicians who are out of touch, who don't seem to care, they just want to point to the next culture war. But when it comes to stuff like safe spaces, absolutely, we need to protect safe spaces. There's no question about that. We need to protect women and girls. But my argument would be is, can we not lower politics to the point where it becomes purely about culture wars when we need to respect all members of our community? Thank you.
Well, it's an absolute despicable waste of NHS funding to have some ridiculous banner being hung in the Royal Stoke, which doesn't actually get to the core issue. And David still tactfully, I'll give him that, dodged the actual question. But I think the reality is, and the concern is that yes, there is indeed men who will transition to be women, women who will transition to be men. They will be trans men and trans women, and their rights should therefore be respected. But I'm not going to live in a world where science isn't any longer real, in a world where biology is somehow being thrown in the bin. A woman is an adult human female, and David callously calls this a culture war. Actually, it's a woman's rights issue. For far too long, even the Cass review stated very clearly that Labour politicians like Wes Streeting, who had to himself apologise for making out that anyone who dared to say that a woman should have a right to a woman's only space was somehow transphobic, that he himself has been on a remarkable journey right before the election and realised the error of his ways. Our doctors and our nurses are trained in science, they're trained in biology, they therefore need to act in that way. We should not be having this dangerous gender ideology infiltrating into our health service, using terms like chest feeding, which is completely and utterly absurd, and confusing many young children, particularly in schools, where again we've seen certain materials infiltrate and penetrate young minds in a way that's causing a real mental health crisis in our schools too. I think it's therefore very important that we make it very clear that biology is a matter of reality. The NHS is there to work on patient sickness, not to be busy doing virtue signalling in order to try and appease the mob on Twitter, a tiny minority of this country, and we should be making abundantly clear that the NHS should not be wasting any of those resources, those finite resources that are so important to protecting patient health.
So we'll now go to one from the floor. So I have my glamorous assistant who will appear with a roving microphone. So yeah, I can see. Yep, let's go. Or just, yeah, one at the front is easiest. So if you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As far as the candidates personally are concerned, what part do they think religion should play in politics?
Right. So if everyone go like, what parts should religion play in politics? Is always a civilized thing that the three things you shouldn't talk about at a civilized dinner party were religion, politics, and sex. I think we're probably going to do all of them tonight. Right, so what part should religion play, if any, in politics? And if Carl would like to go first, please.
Speaking as an atheist, I would say none. But that doesn't stop us respecting everybody else around us. By all accounts, there are approximately 2,900 and something odd different gods, or there have been over the years. And each individual religion wants you to believe that their particular God is the true God. The only difference between people of a religious belief and myself is I believe in one less God than they do. I don't believe religion has a place in politics at all, because we should be dealing with matter-of-fact things. But that doesn't mean I can't respect somebody's right to believe what they want to believe. But I don't expect them to inflict their belief upon me or anybody else. Simple as that. Thank you.
Jonathan?
So, just like politics, religion is a matter of personal faith, personal belief, and is important to each and every one of us. And whilst there are some members of Parliament across the House who will use their faith as a way to guide them when it comes to votes on topics like abortion, for example, I don't think that religion should always have to play a role in that. I think that is personal to the Member of Parliament in those scenarios. However, I think the religious under-teachings, such as I had in my education, play a very important role in my life. My father is someone who has always found the church as a way of connecting closer to God and making him feel at peace. I was an altar boy to the age of 11. I had a Catholic education during my secondary school years. And look, I lost God for a period of time. And in recent years, I feel like I've found him once again, because that faith has been so important to tackling my own mental health when it comes to something that I've had to be very serious in trying to support myself through very challenging times we've all been through in the last 4.5 years. But what I will say is that I do find it quite disturbing that there are certain elements of religions where we're seeing people pursuing their own agenda and using the cloak of their faith in order to gain them access. So, for example, the bishops in the House of Lords are far too often, in particular Justin Welby, bringing the Church of England into major disrepute, in my opinion, because obviously he's using his privileged position, the opportunity to be able to get on the airwaves, to push a very left-wing agenda, which is widely out of touch with communities like we have here in Stoke-on-Trent, North Gisborne, particularly when it comes around the topic of illegal migration. It's okay for him to virtue signal from the comfort of London, but it's not appropriate when it comes to not understanding what the lives of the people in our community. And Justin himself has been on quite a remarkable journey from where his political views once were to what he now thinks they have to be to appease Twitter. But I also think that we have seen a rise of dangerous Islamist extremism as well, and voting on sectarian lines, as we saw in Rochdale recently, which is a very dangerous thing to see, and we should not be allowing this kind of agenda to be going forward.
Tony Blair didn't do God, or we don't do God, as they famously said. What about David? What do you think?
Well, I do God. Recognise you need to have a balanced debate if you become a politician. People may or may not know I am Catholic, and I've made plenty of mistakes in my life, and I pray for forgiveness plenty of times, because that's what we do. We make mistakes as Christians, don't we? And, I think about my mum and my dad and the values they instilled in me, and I'd like to think that's what drives me as a person every single day. But we all have those moments when it comes to anything political. You'll have those opinions. I'll have disagreements with my mum and dad about certain topics. Last year, to give one example, people talked only about the assisted dying as an area of debate, and views can really be impacted by your own personal experiences. My dad was seriously ill last year. He was bedbound, in lots of pain, non-verbal, and it was terrible seeing my dad like that. And for years, if anyone had asked me that question about assisted dying, I would have said absolutely no. But during those moments, I could see why people can argue for assisted dying. It's a really difficult one, and you need to weigh it up. Now, the reality is, then afterwards, my dad amazingly had a load of new tablets, despite everyone saying he wasn't going to make it. And after about 16 weeks in a care home, he decided he absolutely was not going to stay in that care home, and he was coming home. And he's now walking, and he's fit again. So again, you go through that cycle in your mind again. Certainly in terms of my value base, I was brought up that way. I believe in treating people with respect, regardless of any background. And my job, it really will be to bring our community back together. There's too much divisiveness going on, and I don't want it to be that way. But I do recognise the role of a politician versus the role of being a Christian, and understanding that people have different views. Thank you.
So religion is a very private and personal matter. The question was whether religion and politics should be mixed. Politics is about people serving people. Religion is about, faith. As a doctor, and we are trained to keep our religious beliefs aside and treat the person in front of us with humanity and professionalism. I respect everybody's right to practice their own religion, as long as they don't impose their religion or beliefs on others. In terms of religion and politics, I wish we had more humanity, and we used humanity as our source to make the decisions that we make in politics as well. That would probably lead to a better world. So yeah, they should be kept separate. Thank you.
Right, thank you. So I'll go to another one from the ones that have been sent in previously. Now, Tracy from Newchapel asks, I work at a local pot bank. I'm worried about my energy bills at home, but I'm also concerned about higher costs will affect the pottery industry and my job. And I don't know if those of you who saw the Sentinel today, there was a big story about Emma Bridgewater. Their profits are massively down, they've made redundancies, all the rest of it. And I think there's a question about home energy bills, but also energy bills in the ceramics industry, which, and we think our bills are big, I'm sure theirs are a lot bigger. So if we can, first of all, if we can go to, where did we go last time? David first, please.
Yeah. I mean, my family background, like I said at the start, my mum, granddad worked in the pot banks around Tunstall and Burslem, done Bennett & Co. and they're on the Pennick Street Works for Richard Tiles. And my mum, like all of us, it's terrible to see the decline of an industry that brought so much pride to our area. Now, in terms of energy bills, Labour's got a clear plan about how we can start to bring down energy bills that would benefit you as consumers in your home, but also in terms of businesses to get the prices down. We're going to set up what's called, well, it's a publicly owned energy company called GB Energy. It's a move to make sure we get the investment come in so that we produce clean, renewable electricity by 2030. What that means is we're not then dependent on our oil and gas going out onto the open market. How it works at the moment is if you can give more licenses out to oil and gas companies. The problem with that is it goes on international markets. So it does basically absolutely nothing to bring down the price of gas and electricity for either regular consumers or business consumers. And there's also benefits in terms of GB Energy. 650,000 well-paid employment opportunities will come with creating that company. Now, my job will be is to make sure we start bringing that investment into our area. So one, it'll help businesses in terms of bringing those bills down, but I also want to see the benefits of using new technology so we have good, well-paid jobs for our young people locally, and I'll be fighting to bring that investment in. And what I'll also want to do around supporting the industries of the future here is making sure our young people have those skills to do it. That will be technical colleges, it'll be proper programs of apprenticeships. I'm sure Mr. Gullis will talk about apprenticeships. The reality is when we talk about it, we get 1/3 the number of apprenticeships here locally than there were about 10 years ago. The numbers have dropped off. What I don't want is young people moving out of the area. Let's not do that. Let's keep the investment here. And let's do all we can to keep our ceramics industry here. There's also high-tech ceramics we really need to focus on. So let's get the investment in, let's get the bills down, and let's support our proud pottery industry. Thank you.
So this is a story that's not uncommon. With the cost of living crisis, more and more people are being pushed into poverty and struggling to pay energy bills as well. What I would like to see is I would like to support policies which would give some energy rebates and discounts for people, especially for families who are on low income, and also the vulnerable families like pensioners and people who have disabled children. And I would also like some transparency in how these energy companies charge us. 2 years ago, when the Ukraine war broke out, we were told that the government has to pay more for this energy bill, for buying energy, and that was passed down to us as customers. At the end of the year, when the energy companies published their profits, they had made the highest profits ever in their existence. That doesn't actually fit in. So really, I would want some transparency, and I would also want our government to decrease the barriers so that smaller companies can also come into the picture, so that as customers, we get value for our money. And finally, the other bit is there is a lot of renewable energy technology these days, and we should be transitioning from fossil fuels into renewable energy, which is available freely. So for that, I would like to see and I would support policies which would subsidize costs for homes and families that would want to install solar panels, heat pumps. In terms of, the Emma Bridgewater making some redundancies, it's really sad. Again, this is where we need to come up with new ideas. We have a rich heritage and history in the ceramic industry. We should be promoting that so that our city becomes a tourist hotspot, which brings in a lot of income for our economy. And also, we have Staffordshire University. Okay, my time is up, but thank you.
And then can you pass to Jonathan, please?
So it's very important that we remember that the Prime Minister made sure that during this unprecedented time due to Vladimir Putin's illegal and immoral war in Ukraine, which I'm very sad to say the leader of Reform was happy to appease in recent comments, actually made perfectly clear that he paid half of this country's energy bills for each and every household, as well as making sure that 40% of the bills for ceramic companies, for example, were also being covered. That literally allowed their lights to be kept on. Now, what is going on inside the ceramics industry? Well, they are themselves finding solutions to decarbonise. Churchill China, which I was glad to have the Prime Minister with me at the start of the campaign, has found a way of making sure that energy is only used now in the sense of that plates will be fired on one burn, that the technology that's being installed will enable to reduce carbon emissions overall by 40%. And that is allowing the industry the time. What Labour proposes to do with their Green New Deal, their electrification abomination, they're taking a knee to the Greta Thunbergs of this world, will be the final nail in the coffin for this industry, because it will simply not work, because the electrification doesn't work for the type of products that they make. It also will not be installed in time, and each kiln will need an awful lot of power that not enough will be installed in the grid to be able to handle such power. That is the reality. And I see Moaning Mountford looking concerned. He should perhaps go and speak to ceramics companies rather than just pretend to virtue signal from his seated position. Because I do admire him and the Labour councillors at the front clapping every time David speaks. But David also wasn't straight with the public about GB Energy. GB Energy is an energy company that produces no energy. So how on earth is these 650,000 jobs going to generate any energy for your local area? How are they going to be created? What jobs are they going to be? Where are they going to be based? David's not said at any stage these jobs are definitely coming to Stoke-on-Trent. He had Sir Keir Starmer to get his pre-written skips 2.0 approved, sent from London today, and still no answers on the reality. It's nuclear and it's geothermal in our city in particular, using the mines of the past to fuel the homes of the future. That's what we've already started investigating, and that's what I'll be working on with great people like the Friends of Chatley Whitfield, who have an abundance of energy and ability to make this dream come true.
Thank you.
Well, Tracy in Newchapel, you're concerned about your home energy bill and you're concerned about the bill of your employer. Reform UK, one of our key policies is to fast-track new oil and gas licences for the North Sea and scrap net zero and cut the VAT on your energy bills. That helps everybody. Labour talk about creating Great British Energy. It sounds wonderful. It sounds great. They're going to create 650,000 jobs at the same time as making us bankrupt with a net zero agenda. And what about all those people that are employed in the oil and gas industries at the moment? There's no talk about what's happening to their jobs. So maybe the 650,000 jobs they say they're going to create are merely the ones that are going to be redundant from the oil and gas industry. So the net gain is nil. Did you know that green energy is subsidised? And it is sold at a much higher price than it costs to produce, because the cost per kilowatt hour of energy is based on the gas price worldwide. It doesn't cost as much for a turbine to turn as it does to fire up a gas power station. I wouldn't dispute that. However, when you base the sale price of all of your green energy on the price of perhaps the most expensive fuel because you've restricted its supply, and you've been reliant on supply from the other side of the world instead of your own natural resources, it's no wonder it's costing a fortune. It's no wonder our businesses are going bankrupt and our pubs are closing and people can't afford to heat their homes. And my time's up. Thank you.
Right, another question from the floor. I know there's some hands. Yeah, one towards the back, please, Amy, first, and then we'll try and get round. Depending how we're doing time-wise, we may end up imposing a minute sort of response just so we can get some quick ones in, but we'll play it by ear.
Hello, thank you all for turning up. I was watching the TV the other night, and on the TV I saw Nigel Farage in the middle of the channel. Behind Nigel was a boat with 42 illegal immigrants in. Behind them were the French Coast Guard. Can you tell me what we're paying the French Coast Guard for? Why aren't we doing something about this?
Yep, so if everyone can get out, that there are, the issue is about boats coming in from France, and the French seem to be doing little about it, but I'm sure we'll come to the facts in a moment. So again, you're going to go first? I'm sure you'll have something to say.
I wonder why I'm going first on this one. Yes, you're right. Nigel Farage was in the English Channel this week, highlighting the fact that the French Coast Guard are actually escorting migrants across the Channel. To my mind, that's aiding and abetting. And the last time I looked, France was a safe country. So Reform UK's answer to this is quite simple. We literally take the illegal migrants straight back from whence they came to the coast of France. Why we're paying the French Coast Guard, I don't know. Quite frankly, I would pay them based on results. And the results aren't how many they manage to get across the Channel, it's how many they prevent from crossing the Channel. And I would be prepared to pay them for that. And I think that's our stance pretty much. Our aim is for net zero migration. At least for a decade, our country has to catch up. We have been overrun with immigration. And I'm not anti-immigrant. I'll tell you that now. None of us are. My stepfather was Iranian. I'm not anti-immigration. What we need to do is make sure the immigrants that are here integrate into our society and become part of our society, not be inundated to the point where we can't retain our own identity. Thank you.
He's trying to give me 25 seconds here. That's definitely not fair, is it? Right. I'm certain we're going to hear lots of words in a minute down the table about this topic. Firstly, let's not dehumanise people. Some of the language of Suella Braverman and indeed some of my opponents over the past few years have been really quite sad to see. In my family side, my mum is of Polish heritage. My grandmum drove lorries for the Polish army, for the Polish behind the British armies to supply our army in the Second World War. It wasn't safe for her to go back afterwards, came, sought refuge, worked all her life, paid all the taxes, made a massive contribution, I'd like to say, to the pottery industry of Stoke. But let's just take a step back about how we got here. Because what it all is with the Conservatives, it's gimmicks. The number of small boat crossings now is at record highs. And what they always do is they create a problem they then desperately need to try and solve. What they did a few years ago, they got rid of lots of Home Office staff. They were the staff who process application forms to make a decision if someone stays or if they need to be swiftly removed. So the numbers go up from 25,000, don't they, Mr. Gullis, up to 180,000 because you got rid of the staff. Then you have to go and give £10 million a day hotel contracts out to bring people in. So we end up with more asylum seekers here than in Rwanda. And the reason Rwanda will not work, and this is why the election was called, is because it is another gimmick. £400 million spent to date. If someone makes a decision whether to get on that boat or not in France, 99% of people getting on that boat would not be sent to Rwanda. So it's an absolute nonsense. So I'm not a gambling man. I don't know if any other people are around here. I know there's a bit of talk about gambling at the moment. I'm not, but I think if I was, I'd probably take that bet. But what Labour's going to do is move the money out of Rwanda, put it into a border security command. And that means getting the best investigators, the best people on the case, so we get to the source of the problem. That means taking out the criminal gangs at source, putting it on the same level as counter-terrorism and international drugs. We need to go after the gangs because they're the people who are doing this terrible trade in people, and we need to bring a stop to that right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Obviously, our resources are finite. So when demand outstrips capacity, we will struggle. So, immigration should be managed, controlled. I am for a very fair and humane immigration system. The question was, one of the boats, they were the French Guard, and why have they allowed, for the people to have traveled so far? So I would support measures where our government works in strong partnership with our neighboring countries, and also countries where the people are coming from, to explore the reasons of why they're making these dangerous journeys. And also, if they're coming from France, really, if our government is paying for French government, they should be doing their work. What I would like to see is a strong crackdown on human traffickers who actually abuse and exploit the vulnerable people and make money out of someone's desperation. I would also like to see, strong partnerships with neighboring countries, so that at least this dangerous journeys are stopped. And I would also like to support a fair and prompt asylum system where people who have genuine reasons are processed, faster, and those who, resort to illegal ways of fraud or, again, return back to, because that's the sort of thing we should be deterring people from. Thank you.
So David did a fantastic job of not actually answering the question that you asked, sir. The reality is that we do not get a fair deal from the money, the near £1 billion that we've given to France. And I've been publicly critical of that on numerous occasions, despite my own party wishing me to not be. Because I'm not afraid to stand up and say when I think something's wrong because it's going against the interests of our community or the interests of our country. Whereas with Labour, you'll just get the same old robots that Keir Starmer wants to produce in order to read off the pre-written script that will come about. The reality is that the Rwanda policy is the only deterrent on the table. Labour would cancel it. We already have it that you're banned if you come to this country illegally from claiming asylum. Labour would scrap that ban. Therefore introducing a migrant amnesty, because whilst David also did a good job of dodging the question like Sir Keir Starmer did last night, when he refuses to acknowledge the fact that the majority of people claim to come from Iran, from Syria, from Afghanistan, is David really going to stand up and vote to a returns deal where we would send millions of pounds of your taxpayers' money to dictators that cruelly torture political opponents, that suppress the rights of women, that would murder or torture those migrants that we did return to those countries, if indeed that is where they come from? The reality is they're not. So they're going to allow those people to stay, having a migrant amnesty through the back door, rebranding Small Boats Command, which already exists, rebranding the deal with France that already exists, rebranding immigration enforcement that already exists. And when it comes to hotels, David's got a nerve, because when I had a petition, which got over 2,000 signatures locally saying we should end Serco's abuse of the North Stafford Hotel, not he, not Moaning Mountford, not a single Labour councillor could find it within themselves to sign that petition, because they're happy to have open borders and free movement, just like Sir Keir Starmer campaigned for when he came leader of the Labour Party, then ditched it when he thought he could win over your vote and your votes in order to believe that that was the thing he needed to say, not the thing he actually believes in his heart. The man is constantly moving the decks around in order to try and cause confusion. The Conservative Party are the only party who have been regularly standing up and calling for an end to mass migration that's been coming over illegally from France, which is a safe country.
We have 1 minute supplementary if you don't feel it. Do you feel the question has not been answered?
Yeah, to come back. To answer your question, you are absolutely right. I think it's 0.5% of people would be sent to Rwanda on the scheme, which is why it's absolutely not. Right. We've got to have it. We've had a question. Yeah, so basically, in that case, then, you'd never go after any criminal, would you? You'd never go after a criminal if that's the approach you take. You may as well get over to the police. You have to get to the source of the problem. And what this Conservative government have done for 14 years, they break things, they create a problem, and then they decide they need to come up with some kind of solution.
Would you do a returns deal with Iran? Yes or no? Would you do a returns deal with the Taliban?
Take it in
yes or
turns
no?
to give people.
Answer the question, David.
You see, this is what we've had. Every single debate
Answer
we've
the
had,
question.
Mr. Gullis, this is what he wants to get into. I'm not. I'm going to talk about our vision, what we're going to do, and we will go after the criminal gangs, which you have not done. You've not done it. We'll put the top people in that border security command, and we will make sure we go after the criminal gangs. Now, if you don't like it, absolutely fine, but otherwise, all we're ever doing is dealing with the problem once it exists. Sorry.
Thank you. Yep, so a minute, Jonathan.
Yeah, it's a shame David doesn't understand what happened in Parliament, because we actually had a vote to increase sentences to life sentences for those who smuggle people across the channel. Labour voted against every time. You asked me about Rwanda. There is an initial 300 people, but the scheme, which the Rwanda government has said themselves publicly, is unlimited. The initial 300 is to show the processing system actually works. And again, there are countries across mainland Europe that are now looking to replicate this deal. When you, sir, ask about pushbacks, I voted for that to happen in the legislation that we put through Parliament. I stood on the Nationality and Borders Act Public Bill Committee. I also introduced a bill to Parliament to ignore the European Court of Human Rights, and I publicly said myself, I believe we should leave it. And what happened? Sir Keir Starmer and his Labour Party voted it down. I've got a strong track record of standing up for the very things. I think it's a cigarette paper between Carl and I when it comes to this issue. It's just a shame David won't answer a question. Would he do a deal with Iran? Would he do a deal with the Taliban-led Afghanistan? Would he do a deal with Syria and hand millions of your taxpayers' money to dictators that use chemical warfare and murder on their streets and suppress the rights of women? Yes or no, David?
Do you want to come back? Are you okay?
Both good questions. We don't have to worry about criminal gangs. Not under a reform government. Why? Because we've already soured the milk. There won't be anybody wanting to come. They won't be paying gangs to come because they know they will not be welcome unless they are genuine political refugees. It's that simple. What you'll hear tonight is both sides, left and right, blue and red. They've been squabbling over this for decades, but the figures keep going up. Not under a reform government. Thank you.
Right, so I've got another question, pre-sent in one. Again, there is actually a link with the beaches of France. This is from Jimmy. Given the disappointing scenes where our Prime Minister missed some of the D-Day celebrations. Oh, I've cut myself off now. Time's up. I'll start again. Given the disappointing scenes where our Prime Minister missed some of the D-Day celebrations, how do you stand up for our veterans and for all those who gave their lives for our country? And perhaps as it's about the Prime Minister, if we can go Jonathan first, please.
What happened when it came to the Prime Minister departing D-Day early was wrong. He's rightfully apologised. And this matters to me because 2 to 3 weeks before the 80th celebration, my great-great-uncle, who's 100 years old, passed away. He served as a D-Day veteran, one of the last remaining survivors. You can imagine how I felt personally and made those feelings clear to the Prime Minister when I saw what he did. And I'm glad he took the courage and conviction to apologise because it was the right thing to do. When it comes to standing up for our veterans, I'm proud of this government being the first in history to have a veterans minister around the cabinet table, introducing the veterans rail card, giving employers the first 2 years off national insurance when they hire a veteran. I'm even prouder of the fact that I worked tirelessly with the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland as his parliamentary private secretary to introduce legislation to end the vexatious claims against veterans who served in Northern Ireland, who were being dragged in their 70s and 80s back over there to stand in court when Sinn Féin and IRA were going under the radar, not facing the same type of court cases. And I am appalled and disgusted that Sir Keir Starmer has publicly said that if Labour come into power, they will withdraw that legislation, that they will allow these men who are in their elderly years to be dragged back to court and face persecution and face false accusations without being able to prove themselves, causing huge mental health and physical health problems, and some of whom we've seen Johnny Mercer has been supporting, and some of whom have tragically died in the middle of their court case, never being able to fully clear their name. That is unforgivable. That is repugnant. And I hope that David will rightly say that he would never vote for that piece of legislation should Labour be in government.
David, over to you.
Thank you. I mean, that D-Day stuff, if there's a Prime Minister that could be more out of touch with our country, seeing what happened on that day, and Mr. Gullis wasn't particularly quick until he got his lines about how to take him on about that. It took a while before there were any comments about what Sunak did.
Don't you discredit my great-uncle. Don't you discredit my family's name. My great-great-uncle served the armed forces on the beach of the D-Day.
Do you want to pause the clock? This is what we get. Our vets are the best in the world. They serve our country. They deserve our full respect. I'll tell you about my work background. I run housing schemes. Some of our vets are living in the most terrible conditions, damp and mold. So you're asking about that. I work for the YMCA in the city. I've seen vets come into the YMCA who've lived in the most terrible conditions because this Conservative government has let it get that way. That's my background and that's my commitment. My family's got a background. I talked about, the stuff my mum and granddad did in the war, working alongside the British Army. To see what's happened over the past few years, it doesn't matter whether it's vets, whether it's our NHS, whatever the services the Conservatives have overseen, they've broken it all. The disrespect shown to our veterans over the past few years is disgusting. So Mr. Gullis can talk all about Johnny Mercer, who at the moment is leading a big attack on our fabulous Fred, who is a candidate down there, talking lies about a veteran who served in our armed services. That is terrible. Let's get to a place of respect. Let's respect our vets. Let's give them good homes. Let's give them good access to public services and make sure we respect them fully. Thank you.
I have to say, Prime Minister Sunak's actions that day were ill-conceived and ill-judged for a serving Prime Minister of this country. My family has a long military history going back centuries, and I'm proud of them. One of my really proud moments was presenting the Légion d'honneur on behalf of the French ambassador to a very old gentleman in my village, and it gave me great pleasure. I am proud of what our military do. They stand up for our freedoms. The fact that we are here now, even having this debate, is because of the efforts of our military and our veterans. Reform UK want to increase the pay for the armed services. We want to look at pensions and accommodations. We also believe that local housing should be for local people and veterans before non-Indigenous people. Let that sink in. We want to look after our veterans. We don't want to see them homeless on the street. We don't want to see them losing out to people that have done nothing for this country at all. So yes, what the Prime Minister did was ill-conceived, and you can judge that how you may. But I don't believe for 1 minute that Nigel Farage or any leader of reform would do something quite so insulting.
So our veterans and army deserve the utmost respect. If we are here, enjoying the freedoms and liberties, it's because of the army and the veterans. They put their lives on the line and make so many sacrifices so that we can, be free. As a GP, I see, a lot of homelessness, mental health issues, post-traumatic stress, and also, the accommodation for the forces is of a very poor quality. So I would like to see our government, respect our army and veterans and invest in defense so that, they get the support that they deserve for all the sacrifices they've done. They struggle with mental health after all that they've gone through. Their homes are of a poor standard, and many, as David said, are homeless as well. So I would like to see, some policies so that the veterans are looked after and respected, because they deserve the utmost respect from all of us. Thank you.
Right. Back to the floor. We've got lots of hands up. We're going to be here till late. Well, we'll get through as many quick as we can.
Thank you. It was mentioned earlier that CCTV had been put in Tunstall because of scum around the area. I'm assuming it was meant to people with illnesses like addiction, alcoholism, homelessness. Is there anything anyone is planning to do to help these people, to support these people? The George Hotel in Burslem closed down, so more homeless people moved out of there. What socially is going to be done to improve these people's lives, who are mothers, daughters, brothers, sisters, and therefore improve the whole community? Thank you.
Right. Thank you. So if we can start with David, please.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to I made. Are we okay? Sorry. I think it's okay. That's one way to try and put off a candidate as he steps up to speak, isn't it? Yeah, what we've seen in the city, the preventative services that stops people from getting to that point in the first place of desperate need, they've been taken away. So to put it into context, we'll probably hear at some point about levelling up and what success levelling up has been. The reality is services need money, and a lot of that money to stop people getting into desperate need in the first place were taken away. So to put it into context, back in 2010, I guess most people know how councils get funded. You get three sources of funding. You get a government grant, you get council tax, and you get business rates. Back in 2010, when the Conservatives took over power, Stoke-on-Trent City Council used to get £97 million a year to support services, and that would include drug and alcohol services, mental health hubs, youth clubs, to support people. Do you know what that money is today, the government grant? About 26 million. So for every £4 we had to run services in this city, 14 years ago, the government gives us £1 today. And what does the Conservative government say? They say, well, actually, if you want to get the money back in, whack up your council tax by 5%. It doesn't matter that you're paying more, getting less, which you are. Because if you put council tax up down in Surrey, where you've got your houses worth hundreds of thousands of pounds or millions of pounds, they're rolling in the money in terms of that. So we're getting hit multiple times by this Conservative government who's taking money away. We get the government grant cuts. They take away the link. They gave us additional funding for run services. And what you end up with is constantly having to then go back and deal with problems that now exist because of the support that was in place that's taken away. So it's easy to use terrible terms like scumbags, scroats and savages, because it might go down well on GB News. But the people of this city know that the heartbeat of the city has been ripped out as a result of the cuts you've inflicted on us over the past 14 years. So yes, we need well-funded public services. We need to look after our citizens and make sure they get the support they need. Thank you.
So thanks for the question. Having a CCTV is not going to solve the problem. The root causes for, alcohol addiction, drug addiction, crime, antisocial behavior could be because of poverty, social inequality, and also the funding cuts. Over the years, our swimming baths have been closed, the youth centers have been closed. Many youth feel very disaffected. They don't have any sources or channels to channel their energy, so they've fallen off the grid. So really, what we need investment in health and social care and mental health services and drug and alcohol services, so that, these people can be treated, have the detox either at home or, inpatient. Then when they come out, then they need some support so that they could recover. Then after that, they need support into housing and perhaps for some skills training so that they get some sense of purpose, learn some skills, and then integrate back into the society and start employment. So that's what I would like to see. And as an independent, if I were to win, these are the things I would do as well to support these people. Thank you.
So I make absolutely no apology for saying it as I see it, and that campaign successfully led to us securing over £200,000 in the Safer Streets Fund. That meant we've got not just new CCTV, but additional alley gates and better street lighting, particularly enabling to make people feel safe, because they are not coming into shopping Tunstall like they used to, because they fear for their safety. When Stoke-on-Trent City Council, the Labour-led local authority, chose to put single men who had drug and alcohol addiction into the Sneed Arms Hotel next door to young vulnerable families, what do? They start smashing up the town centre, doing criminal damage to people's livelihoods and endangering the very lives of the young people who are there. Because I've worked with 2 of the young families who felt frightened for their life and had them in my office to feed them, to give them teas and waters, to make sure that they get appropriate accommodation. What does this Labour-led local authority want to do? Well, the Gingerbread Centre, yet again, a great local charity that want to invest more in building more properties and add more wraparound support. Stoke-on-Trent City Council is saying they're going to potentially pull £200,000 worth of funding, that important charity, which would mean that charity is particularly on the breadline. In fact, they may even cease to exist at all. Those are political choices being made by the Labour leadership of this city and this council. We've got more bobbies on the beat to arrest those who make people feel unsafe. And with the preventative care, I understand there are people who need help. But a lot of these people have been offered support as well. They need to want to make a change in their lives and improve themselves too. They have to make sure that they make the right choices as well. This is not a one-way street. The state cannot fix everyone's problems. The individual has to want to be helped, want to be saved, want to get better. And that is very important too. And I will never say that the individual should not have responsibility on their shoulders as well. Yes, there needs to be more investment and a major improvement in CAMS, for example, particularly for young people. I've been right to call that out along with everyone else on this panel, that not enough funding and not enough support is why I've led a campaign to have a Band 8A mental health nurse in every GP surgery in our country, which is supported by the Royal College of Nursing, hardly a friend of the Conservative Party, to make sure that we can reduce the waiting list for GPs and get those people the important medical treatment that they need and signposted importantly to care as well. And that has 50 MPs from across Labour, Lib Dems and the Conservatives supporting that very campaign. And I hope if I'm re-elected, I'll continue to make that a reality.
CCTV, it's a useful tool, supposedly for crime prevention. What it will do is make you feel better. But unfortunately, it won't make the problem go away. What our young people and our homeless people need is hope. It's the one thing they haven't got anymore. No housing, no job future, no security, no deposit to put down on a rental accommodation if they're lucky to find one. I want to change that. Hope can be given from the community, with community engagement. The one thing that's missing in all of our towns is community engagement and a sense of ownership. I have numerous ideas that I want to put forward, and they cost next to nothing. And once you get the public involved, it self-perpetuates. My son, I've mentioned him in previous hustings, and he was 34 when he died of a drug overdose. He was also as gay as a row of tents. And he would be telling me, "You tell him, Daddy Kins." Well, I'll tell you now, I saw the anguish that he went through, fighting his addiction, being unable to hold down a job because the services weren't there. And they haven't just been cut under the They haven't just been cut under the current government. They've been cut for decades. I remember in the 80s when there were psychiatric services, youth services, and everything in every community. Where are they now? They're gone. We need to put them back. And until we give people hope, give them apprenticeships, give them a leg up, this problem will not go away. But the CCTV in the meantime might make you feel better. It will make the council feel better as well because they get an annual operating fee. Thank you.
A question this is from Tommy. We've been talking a bit about veterans, so this seems quite an appropriate one to ask now. Tommy, who lives in Stanfields, writes, "As a proud veteran, I was planning on voting for reform, but I'm so disgusted that Nigel Farage has suggested that the West has provoked the war in Ukraine. I can't do that anymore. Surely Putin alone is responsible. What does the panel think?" So we can have Jag first.
Sorry, what does it?
So the question, it was basically saying that Nigel Farage suggested that the West had provoked the war in Ukraine, and Tommy then says, surely Putin alone is responsible for this, but what are your thoughts?
So obviously it's unfortunate, the world has become a very dangerous and volatile place. There's wars everywhere in Ukraine, borders of Europe. There's also a war going on in Middle East. For this, the solution is not more weapons and more money poured into armies so that they fight each other. Wars are only going to create more wars, more hatred, and more revenge. I would want all the parties to come to the negotiating table and agree on a peaceful deal. In terms of the reason for Ukraine war, I think it's a complex issue, can't be brought down to a very small yes or no. So that's what I would like to say. Thank you.
Carl, please.
Well, Tommy, I'm disappointed that you don't want to back us anymore. But I think you may have taken Nigel's comments out of context. The West has perpetuated its expansion towards the Eastern Bloc. It has built more nuclear silos and everything else like that. So yeah, Putin will get twitchy. I am not saying that that justifies the war in Ukraine, because it does not. But remember, you can't necessarily apply the same return logic from the other side. But if you think Labour don't do war and don't do appeasement and blame, just think about Iraq and that illegal war. That's all I have to say on the matter. Give us a chance. We'll prove you right.
David?
Well, what a surprise to see that Nigel Farage is on the side of the dictator Putin. Who would have guessed? Totally, quite simple really, totally irresponsible. We need to stand up. If we don't stand up united to aggression like this, let's just wait and see what would happen. Right. I'm giving my answer to the question. If you want to, I know you're here with the reform guy, I get it, but let's not do the heckling out from the audience. Right. We stand alongside our NATO allies. We protect one another. We invest. We don't allow dictators to be backed by one of the leading candidates in this election. You might be in second place at the moment. For someone like Farage to give those words out, it's totally irresponsible. So let's make sure we stand up, stand united, we stop the aggression, and we stop the people suffering in Ukraine. Let's stand up. Thank you.
So in my time in Parliament, it's been one of the proudest things to see, and actually for the country, I'm sure, relieving, that all sides of the House have been united in condemning Vladimir Putin's illegal and immoral invasion of Ukraine. And I will never be an appeaser to Putin, because believe me, if we do not have our Ukrainian friends' backs, if you think Putin will stop at Ukraine, then you haven't read your history from the 1930s. They will simply go, and we will be, by the end of this decade, in conflict between Russia and NATO. And I do not want to see our daughters, our sons, our heroes who serve in our armed forces in harm's way. As part of the Armed Forces Parliamentary Scheme, I've had the honour of going around many army barracks up and down our country. I've come face to face with Ukrainians who are not military personnel, but teachers, businessmen, retired doctors, who have all brought themselves forward to come to this country to get the very basic training to know how to defend themselves. Men who were injured and scarred mentally by what they've seen on the battleground. And I have no shame in admitting that I welled up being in their presence, because it is the first time in my life I've ever come face to face with men who I do not know if I will ever see again. Men that may die on the battlefield in some of the most brutal warfare that we've seen. The fact that Putin is lying millions of little mines all over the floor of the battlefield, which will blow off hands and feet. The fact that we're in trench warfare, something that we thought was resigned into the history books, but still alive today. The fact that people, brave Ukrainians, have stayed firm, and so I'm absolutely with David. And I'm proud that both Labour and Conservative are united in saying that regardless of who's in government, we will continue to back NATO, we will continue to back to our Ukrainian friends. Slava Ukraini.
So back to the floor again. Now I think that's David and Jonathan agreeing, I think, for probably the first time and only time, but it's good to see. It is good to see that people do actually, that politics is bigger than everything else.
I'm afraid it's a really boring question in comparison to immigration and the inflammatory ones. It's about money. I work in financial services. The pandemic, the war in Ukraine, huge impact on the cost of living. The biggest crisis we've seen in this country was the absolutely catastrophic mini-budget of Liz Truss, £45 billion in unfunded tax cuts. So my question is to the panel, can you articulate, because I think this has a bigger impact on us in Stoke-on-Trent than a lot of the other issues we've talked about, can you articulate the impact on Stoke-on-Trent that your party's national budget policy will have? What impact will we see in our daily lives based upon the policies that your parties are putting forward to do with the budget? And what measures are you prepared to take to ensure we don't end up with another financial catastrophe?
Our cost measures, our savings and our benefits have been calculated by making savings on immigration, foreign aid, taxation, paying money to the Bank of England for quantitative easing interest, and saving about £5 in 100 on government expenditure on quangos and unelected bodies. It's a phenomenal saving. But what we're doing in return is we are increasing the individual wealth of every taxpayer by raising the tax allowance to £20,000 a year. That is a benefit to each and every one of you that pays tax, including pensioners. Anybody below £20,000 a year in earnings won't be paying any income tax at all. That will lift 7 million people out of taxation. It's a very simple policy, and it's cost neutral. If we scrap the VAT on your energy bills, it is cost neutral. The costings are here and you're welcome to see them. If we scrap the VAT on your energy bill, that's going to save you 5%. Well, it doesn't quite work out like that. It's about 3.95% of your household energy bill. savings nonetheless. When you have money in your pocket, you will spend it. And you will spend it in your local economy and your local area. That in itself will generate growth. We intend to scrap business rates for all small and medium businesses that occupy high streets. That incentivises small businesses to come back to our town centres. We're raising the VAT threshold for small businesses and self-employed people to £150,000 a year, reducing the unnecessary burden on smaller businesses. All of these things have a positive impact because our country is run, its undercurrent is the self-employed and the entrepreneur that create the jobs and the wealth in our societies. And the more we can give back to you in these small tax concessions and cutting of red tape, the freer you are to develop. And that's how we propose to develop the area.
Thank you very much. I myself have been affected by that disastrous mini budget. You know, I'm having to do some extra shifts as well to pay my mortgage bills. It's really unfortunate and sad to see, you know, people struggling because of the cost of living crisis and inflation. I mean, the cost of living is outstripping the income. What I can say as an independent is, if I were to win whichever government is in power, I will work hard to ensure that every constituent gets the benefits that they are entitled to. Last week, I visited a food bank in Kidsgrove, and you know, it was really sad, where I was told that more and more people who are working or having to resort to go to food banks, even pensioners. So one thing I would definitely call upon if I were to win is to ensure that our government would work for a future where nobody would go hungry. You know, I would also call for measures for benefit payment to match the cost of the essentials. At the moment, whatever universal credit that is being given is not actually meeting the cost of the essentials. So people are having to, you know, resort to food banks and all charities. So that's what I would do. Thank you.
So the Prime Minister has made it clear in our manifesto that we would have another 2p cut to national insurance. That would mean it would now be £1,350 a year better off to the average worker across our country. That's those people's hard-earned money in their pockets. We'd also cut national insurance for the self-employed, many of whom are the backbone of our economy. To help our small and medium-sized businesses, we've increased the VAT registration threshold to 90,000. I personally campaigned for it to go to 250,000 and laid out a plan in something called the New Conservatives budget proposal before the Chancellor announced his budget, where that could be achieved, as well as making sure that we fully cost and cover apprenticeship costs as well. Because as someone who's had 2 apprentices, going through my own business as a time as a Member of Parliament to understand what it's like firsthand about the system and working with the many amazing providers, of which 13,000 plus apprenticeships have started since May 2020 in our community alone. That is more great news as well. We'd also protect our pensioners, particularly those who live and rely on the state pension, many of whom will be in communities like here in Stoke-on-Trent North, Kidsgrove and Torque. And what we're saying is we're now going to introduce the Pension Triple Lock Plus. That means that the threshold in which you start paying income tax will increase in line with the triple lock as well. Because if we don't do that, by 2027, Labour will introduce a retirement tax that means for the first time, those people on the state pension will have to start paying income tax, putting those people on some of the lowest incomes in the more hardship, which is not what I want to see for those hard-working pensioners. And of course, we have to be aware as well. Sorry, I've just got my notes here, I just want to make sure. On business rates, I hear what Carl is saying, but he's not saying what he will replace that with. What would be the alternative? And Labour themselves have committed to reforming business rates, but again, not said what they're going to do, how they're going to replace it, how much will it cost to the Treasury, because this is all matters. Because as we've seen from the IFS, they've said that the tax burden under Labour will go to its highest levels on record, following their £35 billion black hole, a £2,000 a year tax bombshell to every single family in our community. That is what I want to avoid, another economic disaster, because as we know, Labour always leave office with higher unemployment and higher debt. And you rightfully pointed out that it was this Prime Minister who paid 80% of people's salaries, this Prime Minister who covered energy costs for homes as well. £500 billion worth of support has gone out and across our country, and that now has to be paid back for. Unprecedented support not seen since the end of the Second World War.
Thank you.
Wow. The irony of the Conservatives talking about tax and tax burden when it's the highest in 70 years. Now, people might remember when Liz Truss came in and did the mini-budget. In a time it took a lettuce to beat her, and Mr Gullis was backing Liz Truss, they wiped, because of unfunded promises that came from Liz Truss that you stood up for and backed, it took 425 billion, not million, off pension assets, pension fund assets. What's coming out now is, as the Conservative Party get desperate, there's now 71 billion pounds of unfunded tax commitments that is not funded whatsoever in the Tory manifesto. It's a last-ditch attempt to try and convince you to vote for them, but your record shows absolutely no idea about how to get that tax burden down. All you do is put the costs up on people. Now, in terms of, you asked a very specific question about, okay, how's it costed? In the back of the Labour Party manifesto, it's quite clear on page, you can go away and look, page 122 onwards, it breaks it down to say, okay, this is where the tax will come in, and this is what we'll use to spend it. So the kind of stuff we'll be doing is, VAT on private school fees. That will fund our commitment to do 6,500 new teachers, to bring in the mental health support, to bring in the breakfast clubs. We're going to do some real stuff. If we're going to talk about tax rises, I'll tell you where we'll do stuff. We'll go after the companies making ridiculous profits while we can't afford to pay our bills, can we? What the Conservatives did, they talked about a windfall tax in the past. It wasn't a real windfall tax. They allowed companies like British Gas to make £75 million, not a bad profit line 2 years ago. The most current year, they've made £750 million profit. That's money that could have been used to get your bills down. They don't really care about regular people. They care about the big businesses and their big backers. What else did they not do? They stole Labour's idea around non-doms, or they tried to steal Labour's idea around taxing non-doms. But you know, their promises on non-doms, it's like Swiss cheese. There's so many blooming holes in it. It's ridiculous. If you give people about 4 years to get the money and assets out, you're not going to get that money into fund commitments. So, highest tax burden in 70 years. How on earth would we possibly believe any promises that cost more than Liz Truss's mini-budget disaster not so long ago that Mr Gullis backed?
If you like, do you want a minute? Yeah. You've got 1 minute.
I'm very sorry, sir, but David didn't give you any actual details other than to demand you go and read the back of a booklet from the Labour manifesto. The first time he's brought that along with him, which is an improvement, I suppose. The reality is that we had the secret recording from the Shadow Chief Secretary of the Treasury, Darren Jones, who's admitted to the Telegraph himself that there's hundreds of billions of additional costs on their green agenda, which David is not being honest about. So Keir Starmer's first steps are, as Wes Streeting said, just the first things. It's not the whole package. So we don't know what else is still yet to come down the track. And when it comes to David talking about who people have backed in the past, I don't remember him apologising in 2017 when he backed Jeremy Corbyn to try and make him Prime Minister, when he was out there trying to make him Prime Minister in 2019 with the most dangerous socialist budget I've seen in my lifetime, with a leader who simply would have led our country towards our enemies rather than towards our allies. That is the reality of the individual. Whereas I stood up in Golden Hill, Sandyford, in 2023, after what happened with Liz Truss, I had the bravery to apologise, and I'll apologise to you and for everyone else. Obviously, it was an abhorrent thing what happened because the plan wasn't properly put in place. The financial services sector wasn't given reassurances. The Bank of England weren't giving what they needed. But Labour themselves have admitted they're going to copy and paste our fiscal rules, our tax and spend. So what's the change?
A minute and a half. I think that was a slightly long minute, but we'll give David another 30 seconds later on to make it up. Now, I've got another one we've sent before. This is on education. This is Claire from Tunstall asks, what sustainable solutions do you feel are necessary to end the SEND crisis in mainstream schools across the country? So what sustainable solutions do you feel are necessary to end SEND, that's special educational needs and disabilities, that crisis in mainstream schooling across the country? And if, would Jag like to go first, please?
So, as a GP, again, I come across this quite a lot. Parents are struggling to get their children being supported in these special schools, and it's really sad. And the children are sometimes being forced to attend a mainstream school when they have special education needs, and it's very distressing. Ultimately, this comes down to all the funding cuts that have happened over the years. So I would support a policy which would invest so that these children can get those places in special education needs schools. Thank you.
Thank you. And David, please.
Yeah, in my time being a counsellor, the issue around SEND comes up a lot, and over years, the amount of support available has sadly declined. A few years ago, a couple of years ago, on the council, I sit on the Children and Young People's Scrutiny Committee. And at that time, what's called EHCPs, if that means stuff to people, it's about the support that's put in place for our young people in the school settings. Too many young people were being left behind. They weren't, firstly, in terms of the EHCPs, there's a timeliness still when you're meant to have your first one, and then you're meant to have your annual reviews. On all measures, young people were not getting their EHCPs completed on time, they were not having the reviews, and they're critical in terms of agreeing what support, additional support is needed for our young people. So ultimately, we need to kind of review what we said in the Labour, it is covered in the Labour manifesto. We recognise that SEND provision and the support available to our young people needs to be improved. We are committed to doing a full review of SEND services to make sure that we do put in the right support, that we have the right places in schools as needed. It can often be best in a mainstream school if the right support's in place, but there are cases where, of course, you need that specialist school places. So, yeah, we're committed to completely reviewing it and making sure we put that support back in place that's sadly been lost over the past few years.
It's a very interesting question. Sustainable solution. We need to invest more in the assistance. I can remember when I was a young boy, and that's a long time ago, there were schools where children with severe special educational needs were taken separately from the mainstream, and they were closed. They were closed primarily by Conservative governments as a cost-saving exercise. And as such, those children with these special educational needs were commingled with your run-of-the-mill kids. And it created havoc, and that's no disrespect intended at all. And now there seems to be a vast array of special educational needs and lots of syndromes. I think we need to get back to realistic targets and ambitions. There are kids that need help, I don't deny that. Let's give them that help. That's the only sustainable solution. But we perhaps need to re-examine the whole model. Maybe look a little bit back to our past and maybe bring some of that back into the future. I'm not saying it's the answer. I'm saying it's a topic that needs some serious consideration. Thank you.
Well, this is an immensely important topic and something that's very passionate to me because I spent my entire career before becoming a Member of Parliament for this local community as a secondary school teacher in state schools, both in inner London and inner Birmingham. And as a head of year who was responsible for the behaviour, for the attendance and overseeing those children, not just in looked after care, but also with the HCPs, I totally accept that there has not been enough support from central government into local authorities to be able to deal with the backlog. I'll happily work with David or anyone else in our local community to make sure those children get the support that they need. Now, there is no simple solution. And this is going to take cross-party working. And regardless of who is elected as a Member of Parliament, I hope that party politics is completely removed from this area, and that whoever's in government does do a full and proper review, followed up with the full and proper funding that is necessary. But there are a couple of small things that can be done quite quickly. Stoke-on-Trent was able to secure, thanks to working with Janine Bridges, the former Cabinet Member, and Councillor Dave Evans, again the former Cabinet Member, £7.5 million for the Middlehurst school site in Chell, which will create over 80 additional SEND places. And I know the Council's working very hard at the moment to find a way to get that project off the ground as soon as possible, because that will be a really big step forward in the right direction to build up our own provision. The other thing that we should do is build capacity within existing multi-academy trusts. And where something I actually put forward, and I'm glad actually Labour's adopted, and generally would work with Bridget Phillips and others if they were in government, is actually holding MATs to account by having a proper Ofsted regulation of the leadership at MATs. Because as someone who was a trade union representative in schools, I almost balloted for strike action myself against one of the MATs that I worked for, because they were simply not spending the money on supporting the students in the right way. And so if we can build capacity within existing schools, and as Carl said, skill up not just our teachers through teacher training, which is going on, but our amazing teaching assistants who are a massively underutilised resource in classrooms, then we would have much better support for our young people in the short term, whilst the longer term review hopefully brings those longer term answers.
I know there are still a few hands up here. I know we'll try and get through some quickly. Yeah, there's one towards the back. I don't think we have another one from the back. Hey, will be done by that. Yeah. I was going to do probably about another. If we just give them a minute of time, just get something up.
Thank you. Well, I've got a question from my 20-year-old daughter. She would like to have been here tonight, but because she's at university, she was offered a shift. So she's working tonight. And her question is, because her parents both work, she gets the lowest maintenance loan, so she has to find £2,000 a year just for accommodation. And she wants to know what each party plan to do, either to support or decrease the support of the financial for the future of tomorrow.
I can answer it really quickly. I'd love to.
1 minute.
Yeah, I'll do it even quicker than that. I'd love to give you a better answer than this. What Labour's saying at the moment is they're going to review it. There's a lot of stuff we want to do, but the reality is the financial position we're going to inherit means that we can't do all we want to do immediately. So inside the manifesto, inside what we've said we understand we need to do more, but we can't commit at this point in time to giving you and your daughter the answer she wants right at this moment in time.
Reform stance is quite straightforward. We would scrap straight away the interest on all student loans. And in order to retain many people within our key services like the NHS, what we've said is, for 10 years post-qualification, for every year you serve within the NHS, we will take 10% of your student debt away. And that's what we propose to do, as well as introducing agricultural apprenticeships and lots of other things. But primarily, it's scrapping the interest on the student loan debt. That's how we would do it. Thank you.
So for students, it's a very uncertain time, especially coming out of universities. They're graduating, then finding no jobs. I would like our government to see and support measures where we invest in skills and jobs with good pay, so that these students are appreciated and find a job and then go on to stay in this country and work and support us all. So I would like to support measures where government would invest in creating jobs and also creating an environment where when the students come out, they can easily thrive and be successful. Thank you.
1 minute.
At the moment in time, I believe that too many of our young people are going to university because it's been seen as the be-all and end-all, and therefore we've totally disregarded the skill sector and further education, and the imbalance is improper as far as I'm concerned. And actually, if you look at Germany, where they have a gold standard, not just for the academia, but across the board, where if you want to go and be a plumber, you are as valuable to the German economy as if you want to go and be an English student at university. And we need to get back. And I was always disappointed by Labour's sort of 50% driven target, which was a number I think picked out of obscurity when it came to young people going to university. But in regards to your daughter directly, I think there does need to be a scrapping of the interest. I personally believe that and will happily espouse that when it comes to student loans. I think we need to get a return to, and I think Labour's idea of banning 0 hours contracts is a bad idea because a lot of students rely on those 0 hour contracts in order to earn money as well. And we need to also make sure that we look at student accommodation, building appropriate accommodation that's affordable for students, not relying just solely on the private rented sector.
Thank you. Right, next we're going to blitz through 2 or 3 more questions then, a minute. Not everyone's going to get. Afterwards, you can grab people. Right, yep. If you can get somewhere towards that side, right-hand side. Yep. It's just so everyone can hear online as well.
Thank you very much. I've actually come because we had the advert at my local church, St. Joseph's, up the road, Churches Together. So I thought I'd ask a question about perhaps the most vulnerable people in our society. Lots of us may know people who have received PIP or been refused PIP. Do we think that the system at the present moment in time actually treats people with the dignity that they actually deserve? Because I personally think it doesn't.
Yeah, I got 1 minute again. It's about PIP.
Thank you.
Dignity.
Good question. I agree. The current system is broken and it needs a complete review and a rethink. And that's what I would be pushing for personally, and I think that's what Reform's stance is as well. That's all I can say at this point. It's wrong. It's broken. Let's fix it.
Check.
Again, I agree. You know, people who are vulnerable need to be respected and supported. Again, with the welfare cuts and everything, the goalposts have changed, and people are really finding it difficult to access the benefits that they are entitled to. Clearly, whichever new government comes, they should look at this again and review it and make it fair that people who are entitled to get those benefits that they deserve. Thank you.
It's a great question, and the answer is no. And it's personal to me, because there's someone in my own family who solely relies on PIP because they're unable to work due to mental health. And of course, you'll appreciate I won't go into the full details. But what's not right is the constant panic and fear through the constant reassessments, the fear that the doctor's note won't be believed by the panel when it comes to those reviews. And so I really think there has to be, yes, welfare reform, which my party is pushing, and absolutely making sure those who can work do work, because it is actually good for physical and mental health. It massively improves the life chances and the physical and mental health well-being of people. But for those who are unable to, particularly those who have terminal illnesses, who have been demanded to be dragged back and be reassessed. I was proud when my party ended that for some of the long-term terminal illnesses where people no longer have to be reassessed once the doctor has given the note to say that sadly that person is on their end-of-life plan. But for those who are on PIP, I would want to see a system that is fair and understanding towards those. And actually what we do is have more wraparound support, even if we have a bigger gap between reassessments, of trying to aid and support those people, whether they are able to go back into work or not. But I'll be happy to sit down with you and hear about your own experience and what else can be done to improve the system.
And David, please.
The answer is, it's a terrible system where you're getting people make assessments who aren't medical professionals, and it's quite, I used a word earlier about dehumanising. The situation people have been through with PIP, I know someone who's got multiple sclerosis. They are not getting better. And they live in absolute constant fear that next time they have to have an assessment come around, do I tick the right boxes to make sure I keep that PIP? It's not a fair system. It's never been a fair system. It's set up basically to make sure they cut the welfare bill as much as possible. It's not about people. It's about taking away support, making cuts. So absolutely agree with you. It's not a good system. It needs to be looked at, and we need to show some care and respect to people who've got disabilities and have additional support needs.
Right, thank you. So we've got time for one final question. So we have one towards the back, please. Thank you. So other people do grab the candidates after, and we got. Oh, okay.
So as Jonathan mentioned earlier,
sorry, can you hold?
Sorry. As Jonathan mentioned earlier, he supported bringing high-skilled jobs into the Stoke-on-Trent area, which sounds great in principle. But what are you going to do to support the huge disparity in our local education system to ensure that we're producing adults that are actually capable of these high-skilled jobs? And it doesn't mean that we have to have, when those jobs come about, they're filled by people from outside of Stoke-on-Trent, which subsequently increases housing prices and rent prices.
Can we just have just a quick attack?
I'm so sorry, because I'm deaf in one ear and I struggle to hear with the acoustics. So do you mind just repeating it one more time? Sorry, then I just want to make sure I've understood the question fully.
Sorry, I'll talk really quickly as well. So as you mentioned earlier, you've supported bringing high-skilled jobs into the local area, which obviously sounds great, but there is a huge disparity in our local education system. What are you going to do to support and ensure that we're producing adults that are capable of completing those jobs, which subsequently at the moment are being filled by people that aren't from the local area, which then leads to an increase in rent and house prices?
Thank you very much. That is a superb question, and you bang on the money. It's no good me just standing up and saying I'm bringing 500 jobs to the Home Office and up to 1,700 jobs at Chatty Valley West. How are we going to make sure local people get those jobs? Because that is the crux to levelling up. If we do not get our young people the better education, that means high-quality phonics, where we've seen under Labour, 53% of our pupils were meeting the standard. Now it's 75%. 60% of our schools were rated good outstanding under Labour. Now it's 93% in Stoke-on-Trent North. And we've got the fantastic St Mary's here, who's just got outstanding yet again because of the high-quality provision they're providing. Those foundation skills in the early stages, as well as having the family hubs to support some of the most vulnerable and disadvantaged from 0 to 19, rather than the old short start system that didn't give that support over the childhood's life. That is so, so important. It's about having, as we've just secured, £2.3 million for Burslem's campus at Stoke College, where they're going to have a new advanced green skills centre, so we could get local employers tied in with the college to have young people working alongside the future green manufacturing jobs and engineering jobs of the future, as well as the Silicon agenda that I'm a very big fan of. Silicon Stoke is a real thing. Our university is the best in the UK for digital games courses. We have the digital T-levels at the City of Stoke-on-Trent Sixth Form College. We have the talent. We have VCCP, the largest digital advertiser in the country, who have set up their second only ever office in the UK here in Stoke with an academy. The ones who do the Cadbury's advert with the gorillas on the drums, they're here in our city wanting to recruit our local young people and skill them up.
Thank you,
it's about unlocking that talent by linking with employers, our colleges and our universities, as well as the education system having the appropriate skills going forward.
Your time's up.
One of the things we want to introduce is common sense teaching as well. We want our teachers to concentrate on teaching basic skills and life skills as well, like how to apply for a bank account. I know that sounds pretty simple, but so that you can understand that you've got to pay your council tax, you've got to pay your electric bill, how to register for those things. These are some of the most fundamental things that our children are coming out of school being unable to do. We want to promote that. As a former college lecturer and head of school, and despite leaving school myself with nothing, I am all in favour of apprenticeships in education, and we would be very pro-apprenticeship. We're also very pro-agriculture as well. We want to see 70% of our UK food production being created, manufactured and grown in this country. I'm running out of time. We are very pro-education, but just remember, not everybody can be a graduate. We still do need people to do the real jobs, but they need to have common sense education to survive in the big bad world out there. Thank you.
Yeah, so I've worked with young people for over 20 years, and sadly, not enough opportunities, not enough investment in our young people. I was lucky, I guess, 20-odd years ago, 25 years ago, I went locally to Keele University. I then got an opening, I stayed, got a well-paid job, didn't need to leave the area. Too many of our young people, and this is what people say on the doorsteps, too many of our young people feel the need to go out. I was with a young person yesterday who was outdoor knocking with me, moved to Manchester, family's still here, didn't feel they had enough opportunities of high-skilled, high-paid work locally. And we do need to be a bit careful about rhetoric, about numbers, about 500 Home Office jobs. My understanding is about 50% of those are not local people, because it's so heavily based on people being able to dial in, or they're certainly not putting the money back in locally at this point in time. Now, the one thing we need to do is we need to get our young people skilled up for the opportunities of the future. I had a meeting a few days ago with the Chamber of Commerce. They want us really to make sure we benefit from the new high-paid, high-skilled work of the future. So if that's green tech, if it's AI, we need to make sure our young people have the skills. So what we're going to do is set up technical colleges. We're going to work with employers to identify what employee needs are. We're going to work with schools. We're going to work with colleges. We're going to work with local businesses to make sure our young people have those skills they need so they can stay locally in high-paid, high-quality work. And that is what I'll be fighting for every single day.
So thank you for the question. Unfortunately, the sad reality is our city has one of the highest levels of illiteracy. So we could create 5,000, 10,000 jobs, but to fill those jobs, we're bringing people from elsewhere, and that's what is happening. They will buy, rent, and that increases prices for all of us. So really, we need to be thinking ahead of this and invest in our children, in our schools, support the parents so that they have that ability to work flexibly so that they can send their children to school. So we need to also support policies which would help low-income families so that they understand the importance of education. I would also like to support policies that ensure there is equitable access for education, healthcare, and social services. That is the only way we can ensure that children can become literate and then go on to take the local jobs and be successful here. Thank you.
Right.
Have you visited Summerbank?
Yeah, so is that disparaging how we...
That's a great question. I believe I'm just already looking at Nathan, who's worked for me, and we have visited Summerbank, indeed. And I think I've visited actually every school now in the constituency. And you are correct. Disparity is not appropriate. I remember when I was a child, growing up in rural Warwickshire, the only state school that was available to me was one that was on the verge at the time of being shut by the government. So my parents, David made a sort of jibe earlier on, but my parents chose to use all their disposable income to give me the privileged education I was in the public school. And I'm not apologetic for that, because ultimately my family thought that was the right thing for me and their circumstances at the time. We were lucky to have the ability to make that decision. Many parents aren't. And so what we need to do is to have multi-academy trusts held to account. I introduced a bill to Parliament that said you could move some of the Ofsted framework that's on head teachers and instead move it onto the leadership of multi-academy trusts, which would relieve work for the head teachers and the teachers and would hold to account the money men at the top of these multi-academy trusts and make sure that if they're failing, that you go and rebuild new multi-academy trusts, some with externals who are doing a great job, like ARC, for example, or indeed within our own community where we have some fantastic, like Whitfield Valley, who's an outstanding multi-academy, part of an astounding multi-academy trust, as well as actually reminding that whilst the government does give lots of guidance, ultimately, head teachers are responsible for the decisions that are made around behaviour policy and marking policy. David will talk about recruiting 6,500 more teachers. That's a quarter of a teacher per school. That isn't going to solve the problem. It's about making sure you have the highest rigour and standards with an Ofsted framework, which sadly the Labour Party have once wanted to abolish and now want to reform. A curriculum that we have introduced that's seen education standards make us the 4th best readers in the world, the best in the West. Labour want to tinker with that again. And I promise you, as someone who came into education just after the Labour Party left office as a teacher, it took years to turn around the flailing and the failing education system that Labour left behind, where dozens, tens of thousands of young people weren't getting the levels they needed to go and get the skills and opportunities in places like Stoke. Instead, they riddled 88 of our schools with a PFI contract that's just seen a 19% increase, costing them tens and thousands of pounds a year.
Thank you. Yeah, I would get. I think education, it's an important one actually because of disparity. So if you'd like to come back with...
I'm just going to say I was not making any disparaging comments about parents who, understandably, they want the best for the kids. And if they've got the means and they want to send their kids off to private school, absolutely no problem whatsoever. The reality is, in this city, and it was covered in the Guardian piece the other day, we've got young people being taught to GCSE in key subject areas, maths, English, science, by supply teachers. That's not okay. So I'm not apologetic about the fact we will put VAT onto private schools, because we do need to make sure all people have that equality of opportunity to succeed. And absolutely, when there's a disparity between schools, it's not okay just to kind of flag what's fantastic. We need to be real. My sister was a teacher for 15 years. In that time, she saw the additional TAs take out when the schools had to come after the ongoing cuts, year after year after year of cuts. Like all public services, it's the same for schools. The money was taken out, you lost your teaching assistants, you lost the additional money in terms of pupil premium having to be used in certain ways. So it's okay to point to outstanding that. The reality is go and speak to teachers. I do it all the time. Go and speak to heads and they'll tell you it's not all rosy. We need to look at how schools get funded. We need to make sure they get the right support in place so that all young people have an equal opportunity to succeed regardless of the school they go to. Thank you.
Yeah. Right, so that is the end. Well, not the end. We've got the summing up. So now it's going to be 3 minutes each, and I will be strict on the 3 minutes. I know I've been a little kind, perhaps, but yeah, I'll be very strict on the 3. And again, we start at the beginning, alphabetically A to Z, so we're now going to go alphabetically Z to A, if that makes sense. So again, David first. So
that's
your
okay.
3 minutes starts.
I did work it out. I might be coming first. It was in reverse, so that's good. I'm going to keep it really simple at the end. After 14 years of the Conservatives running the country and making decisions on your behalf, do you feel better off? After 14 years, we've talked about safety tonight. Do you feel safer when you go into our town centres? Do you feel safe where you live? Are you confident after 14 years that when you need treatment on the NHS, it's going to be there in a timely way for you? Or are you expecting to be in pain or having to make that decision that some people might be able to make to go private when most people can't? Are you worried like my dad is? When he had a heart attack about 10, 12 years ago, an ambulance came quickly, undoubtedly saved his life. Do I have that confidence now that an ambulance would come quickly? No, I don't. We've talked about young people and opportunities tonight. Do you feel young people have more opportunities today than they had 14 years ago? Again, if the answer is no, it's time to vote for change. So what I'm asking for tonight is I'd be humbled if you would offer me your support a week today. Stoke is my heartbeat. This area is my heartbeat. It's where my family are based. It's where my family live. I don't want to see more decline take place in the city. Let's get a Labour government in. Let's do what we can. It's not going to be quick, but we're going to do the sensible 6 steps we've talked about tonight, and we will make life better. Please, if you want change, you have to vote for it. If you don't, we'll have 5 more years of chaos and confusion with however many prime ministers may come along in that time. Thank you.
There's a very simple choice in this election. It's either Conservative or Labour here in Stoke-on-Trent North, Kids Go and Talk. A vote for any other party guarantees you a Labour MP. A Labour MP who in 2015 tweeted that he would want to see a deal with the EU to bring more illegal migrants from mainland Europe. A Labour MP who in 2016 on the day of the Brexit referendum tweeted that he was praying to London and the South East to save him from Brexit, even though 73% of you in this constituency voted to leave the European Union. A Labour MP who in 2017 was Jeremy Corbyn's candidate and was hoping to become the MP for Stafford, having not been able to become the elected councillor in Stoke-on-Trent South constituency, and then eventually finding himself as a councillor in the Stoke-on-Trent North, yet still refuses to move. I am the only candidate on the ballot paper that lives in the Stoke-on-Trent North Kidsgrove Talk constituency, the only candidate who will live with the consequences of the decisions that are made in Westminster as well as with your local MP. I am the only candidate with a record of actually standing up and delivering for our local community, because I've spoken 4 times more than my Labour predecessor could ever be bothered to do. Councillor Finlay is shaking his head. He should look at the stats. They're there for everyone to see. A Labour councillor who made sure that in the past that when he's talked and made decisions that they've put individuals dangerously into the Sneed Arms, making that we've seen crime on our streets. A Labour councillor who refused to sign a petition to say that we should end Serco's abuse of Stoke-on-Trent and clear out the North Stafford Hotel of illegal migrants. A Labour councillor, Sir Keir's candidate, Sir Keir Starmer, who made 10 pledges to his Labour members, lied to them, stabbed them in the back, and now is expecting you to believe that he's changed. Labour, Sir Keir Starmer, who stood by Jeremy Corbyn and said he was a friend, and when others refused to serve, he ran in to his side and now has stabbed him in the back and is telling you that he is somehow changed. David Lammy, who told you that you were a Nazi basically if you were pro-Brexit. Yvette Cooper holds up signs saying refugees welcome. Many of these people have not changed. We saw that with Azir Ali, the Labour candidate for Rochdale, with his vile anti-Semitism. The reality is, since I've come in, we've had record amounts of funding, £200 million plus to fix our roads. We've got money for improving our bus services, which is now turning a profit, and Labour have refused to back my petition to scrap the cap and allow you with a free bus pass to use it before 9:30 in the morning, despite having the money to do it. Have increased the budget by £19 million a year for 7 years to invest in new electric buses. Have put CCTV in Kidsgrove and in Tunstall, 333 additional police officers on our streets, £56 million from the Levelling Up Fund that's going to breathe new life into Tunstall Library and Baths, funding for Bursham's indoor market, funding for Port Vale to improve our local community around there, funding for the college at Bursham campus to create the jobs and the skills that we need for the future. I'm proud to have served, and I'm asking you kindly to once again allow me to serve you for the next 5 years. Vote Jonathan Gullis on the 4th of July.
Phew. Right, I'll keep it short. Over the years, we have tried and put our faith in all the political parties. We've tried right-wing MPs, we've tried left-wing MPs. What have we got? Our living standards have fallen. Our public services are overstretched and down on their knees. Irrespective of which party has come to power, we have always been at the receiving end of getting a raw deal. We had a city which once was a thriving potteries town with rich heritage, rich history. Now we've got a city with cost of living crisis, poverty, inequality, roads littered with potholes, rising crime, antisocial behavior, drug addiction, unemployment. This time we have a choice. We can opt for more of the same and risk further decline, or try for something new, a positive change, a real change. A vote for me would be a vote for somebody who would fight your corner to the best of my abilities, because all I'm here is for the people. I want to try my best. A vote for me would be a vote for safer, healthier, and vibrant Stoke-on-Trent. So please vote independent. Please vote Jack Boyer Party. Thank you.
For 100 years, we've had a two-party system. Red or blue, you take the pill. But are you getting better? No. We're getting poorer and we're becoming more sick as a country. The only party I believe that can make a difference for you is the Reform Party, because primarily we want to take, and it's a generic term, we want to take back control. We want our country back. We want to recognise what we remember our childhood being. That doesn't help many that are young at the moment, because they won't remember what my childhood was like. But I remember when it was safe to walk in the street. I remember when you did get a good education a basic good education, but you got one nonetheless. Reform are the only ones that are looking for radical change, putting you back at the centre of everything that goes on in this country. It's about time we got rid of the red-blue saga, because nothing's changing. Nothing at all. Vote for a change. Vote for what you know will make a difference. Use your head. Read our contract. We don't even call it a manifesto, because manifestos are lies. Our contract with you. Read it. Decide for yourselves. And I'd like to thank, while I've got the time, I've still got a little bit of time left, I'd like to thank all of my 3 fellow candidates on here for the hustings that we've done during this election period. It's brutal out there. It really is. But we're all doing it for the same reason, because we all believe that we can do better for you. David has good policies, I believe, but they don't quite align with mine. The doctor has good policies too, but they don't quite align with mine. Jonathan has good policies. His don't quite align with mine. But I could take a little bit out of all of them and make a much better society for you. So I thank you for coming here tonight, and I thank you for giving me the time to bend your ear a little bit, and maybe, just maybe, 1 or 2 of you may change your mind from your voting intention when you arrived. Thank you very much.
So thank you all for coming this evening. On your behalf, I'd like to thank Carl, Jag, Jonathan, and David. Hopefully it's cleared things, or your heads are completely battered and you're even more confused. Either way, I hope it has been useful this evening. If you would like to chat with, I'm sure some of the candidates would be happy to have a bit of a chat if someone just a few private things with one another. And of course, if you've not had enough of politics this evening, if you think tonight was brutal, then 2 a.m. UK time, you can watch Trump and Biden going one for one another. I'm sure you can find it online. So if you want some even more politics, look online later on. But once for all, again, thank you very much for coming this evening, and thank you to the candidates. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Joe.